one way or the other to stop him. Now, in Luke chapter 20, verse 20, my fourth point is Jesus spars with the Pharisees and the Sadducees on a number of issues. Luke 20, verse 20. So they watched him and sent spies who pretended to be righteous that they might seize on his words in order to deliver him to the power and the authority of the governor. Again, got something in the eye here. Again, we find Jesus pointing the way to the real truth is as opposed to the religious traditions that were being taught and practiced by the religious leaders of Israel. Now, the truth is continuing at this point, driving a deeper wedge between what Jesus has to offer and what they had to offer. The religious leaders see no other alternative than to find some way of getting rid of Jesus. At this point in time, they really began to feel they were really threatened by Jesus. Now, the fifth point is Jesus issued a warning to all of the people concerning the scribes. Luke chapter 20, verse 46. Beware of the scribes who desire to walk in long robes, love greetings in the marketplace, the best seats in the synagogue, and the best places at the feast. Now, the scribes were Pharisees who had become the zealous defenders of the law and the true teachers of the common people. But by New Testament times, they held undisputed sway as the recognized exponents of the law and the reverend representatives of Judaism. They received the deep respect of the people as indicated in the honorable term rabbi, meaning my master or teacher. Proudly they claimed the positions of first rank, sought the public acclaim of the masses, and dressed in long robes like the nobility. So, by now, what was happening is that there was a major tug of war going on in the hearts of all these people. There were people who had been taught and trained by the scribes, and now Jesus is coming along and challenging them with the truth and real authority. Their loyalties are now divided, and they are susceptible to being pulled in either direction dependent upon the current situation of the moment. Now, another point is Jesus begins to prepare his disciples for his second coming. In the midst of all that is transpiring during this important and very crucial week of Jesus' ministry to mankind, he now begins to expound on his second coming and the events that will precede it. Luke chapter 21, verses 25 to 27. And there will be signs in the sun, in the moon, and in the stars, and on the earth, distress of nations and perplexity. The sea and the waves roaring, men's heart failing them for fear from the expectation of those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Oh, we're moving right along. Jesus is looking beyond the importance of this day and into the future of all believers who would come to know him. The fascinating thing about Jesus is that he simply continues to speak the truth and the things that are necessary for our salvation without being sidetracked by the scribes. He does not allow their attacks or disputes stir him away from what his real purpose is. Now, I'm going to add something here that's really not in my notes, but the scriptures that I just read, Luke chapter 1, verses 25 through 27. A lot of things are going on now in our weather and all kinds of situations around the world. Right now, over in the Philippines, there's a gigantic typhoon ready to bear down on it. I saw pictures of it from space, from the space station. And in this day and age, more people are having heart attacks at a much earlier age than ever before. And I'll tell you, things are happening, but they're happening for a purpose, and that is to get God's people ready for what is about to take place. So now we're to the plot and sentence to kill Jesus. The Jews are now fully aware that Jesus has gained the hearts of the people and that they are losing control of their nation. Their jealousy and self-protection are keeping them from receiving the revelation that Jesus is indeed the Messiah. Their only recourse is to have him put to death. In order to do this, they must do it in a deceptive enough way to avoid mass hysteria. Now let's go on to Luke chapter 22, verses 1 and 2. Now the feast of unleavened bread drew near, which is called Passover, and the chief priests and the scribes sought how they might kill him, for they feared the people. Hold on a second, I gotta get something to wet my whistle. All right. Luke chapter 22. Oh, I already read that. Luke chapter 22, verses 1 and 2. See, Brother Jamie, I also repeat my scriptures. From this point on, the plot is worked out on how to seize Jesus at the perfect moment without causing an uprising. Judas goes on to portray Jesus in the garden. Jesus is taken before the Sanhedrin, which is the highest Jewish council during the Greek and Roman periods. During this time, Jesus is mocked, beaten, and Peter, who once had the great revelation of who Jesus was, denies him. Jesus is experiencing one of his greatest moments of rejection. He's also handed over to Pontius Pilate, then to Herod, and then back to Pilate, who issued the sentence that the Jews have requested. Now, all these scriptures and things I've said today the way TV's going these days, this sounds like it'd make a great plot for a TV show. Matthew chapter 27, verse 20. But the chief priests and elders persuaded the multitudes that they should ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. Matthew 27, verses 22 to 23. Pilate said to them, "What then shall I do with Jesus, who is called Christ?" They all said to him, "Let him be crucified." Then the governor said, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they cried out all the more, saying, "Let him be crucified." So, what was it about Jesus that caused the scribes and the chief priests to reject him? Was it because they were losing control and weren't willing to let go? Did Jesus challenge all of their preconceived ideas and philosophy? The truth that Jesus spoke challenged their security and the very foundation of their spirituality. Now, I want to bring it to today's time and age. How many of the people out here today will reject Jesus simply because they are afraid to let go of their past and present securities? Now, we did some door knocking yesterday and some visiting out in the neighborhood. I got that organized and we got that going yesterday afternoon. And before we started, we had a time of prayer and everything. And I told the people, and stuff. And over the years, I've said the same thing to people and everything. And if they're not rejecting us, but they're rejecting Christ. I was told yesterday not to go to one house because the man was a Catholic and that he would literally run me off his property. I was warned not to go to that house. And I went anyway. I put a flyer on his door inviting him over, and he lives right across the street from the church. And I left a flyer on his door inviting him to our Sunday morning service, and we're having a dinner afterwards. And I didn't get shot at or anything, but of course he wasn't home either. So, but they're not rejecting us, they're rejecting Jesus. A lot of times when you go out and canvass neighborhoods and everything, people come back, they're downtrodden because, well, these people didn't like us, they said, "Man, we're not going to do this again." And I said, look, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting Jesus. And they did, I'm getting ready to lose my voice. And they did the same things back in this last week, years ago, as they're doing today. How was it that the scribes and the chief priests were able to sway the multitudes to reject Jesus after following him and even receiving him as their Messiah? They understood and practiced the manipulative tactics of swaying a people. Luke chapter 23, verse 23 says, "But they were insistent, demanding with loud voices that he be crucified. And the voices of these men and of